I deleted my notes from last week. I am not going back to those because if I left them in my notes, I would go back. So I deleted them for the sake of your sanity. Now, I can tell you that that was about 15 or about 10 pages on 3 words or 4 words, and now we are 12 pages on 4 words. So we have a lot to talk about, and let's just go ahead and jump in. So Matthew 6:10, your will be done. Okay? Now, I'm going to say some stuff, and I know I always say this, but I'm going to say some stuff that might rock your boat a little bit. And I'm going to be very intentionally theological tonight. Okay? I'm going to be theological, and I challenge you, nay, I expect you to be serious about thinking, silly table in the corner, to be serious about thinking about this. I'm going to say some things that very well could offend some of you freewheelers, but stay with me. Okay? Bear with me. All right? Now, verse 10. We turn to the heart of the matter as we move down. To be honest with you, thy kingdom come is extremely powerful. But what's maybe more powerful as I've reflected on it is your will be done. The word will is thelomai, and it means the desire, the gumption to do something. Okay? How will we ever want a kingdom? I have a lot of questions for you tonight, and they are rhetorical in the sense that I don't need you to ask them out loud, but I do need you to ask them to yourself. How will we ever want a kingdom that is already here and not yet fully present to be made fully known if we don't want what the king wants? How will we ever want a kingdom that is already here and not yet fully present? That's the theological mystery we talk about, especially in the New Testament, called the already not yet. To be made fully known if we don't want what the king wants. When we pray, it is very likely that we're asking things that are not in line with the will of God. How many times do you hear someone pray and think, I'm not sure that what you're asking is something God approves of at all? You ever ask yourself that question? You ever ask yourself honestly about how you pray? You ever evaluated how you come to the Lord and how you talk? How do you pray? What do you request? And the question that you need to ask yourself is that something that He approves of at all? Because our prayer here is, thy kingdom come and thy will be done, not mine. Right? How scary is it that we ask for things that God does not approve of? Or better yet, things that are just outright not in His will whatsoever. Jesus commands us here that if we're going to pray, then the third step, or really the fourth step, is your will be done. King James, thy will be done. Theologians speak, now we're already jumping in, okay? Theologians speak about what we call the 2 wills of God. Okay? Some of y'all, buckle up. The 2 wills of God. And yes, they are technical, and yes, they may be strange to some of us, but they will help us get a handle on what we're talking about. Okay, now if you're taking notes, please write this down. Okay, the first will is called the decretive will of God. It's where we get the word decree. Okay, D-E-C-R-E-T-I-V-E. Decretive. D-E-C-R-E-T-I-V-E. Decretive. The act of decreeing something. The decretive will of God is described as the sovereign, efficacious will of God, or the will of God that always comes to pass. Never fails. This will is unfailing and all-powerful. This is will number 1. The decretive will of God. This will is not known by man almost ever. Now I need you to listen carefully to this. The decretive will of God is secretive. It is not known to you. Nor is it supposed to be. It's the most mysterious form, out of the 2, of course, of God's will. It is known to God and no one else. The decretive will of God is the will that makes up the fabric of reality. The decretive will of God makes up the fabric of reality. The very essence of what is real. One way to look at this is that God's decretive will makes up everything that happens. In other words, you could say, in a very real sense, that reality is God's decretive will. This raises an obvious question, one that's a valid one, and we can't fully tackle tonight because we don't have time. But what is the difference between what is bad that happens like evil and what is good that happens that is righteousness? Where do they come from? What's the difference? What's their origin point? Is it different at all? We all know and have the sense that God is in control and that the events of our lives, if we're being honest, are largely out of our control. Sure, we have a will, and sure, we have choices that we make, and sure, we have powerful drives and urges that come to bear on the choices we make. Yes, all very true. But the decretive will of God is not what Jesus tells us to pray for. Listen to me. The decretive will of God is not what Jesus tells us to pray for. But there are three things we can learn from the decretive will of God. Number one, and you know these, but I'm going to reiterate them. God is in charge and ordains all things that come to pass. Ephesians 1:11. God is in charge and ordains all things that come to pass. Number two, God is never frustrated or thwarted in what he wants. Never frustrated, never thwarted. Number three, God will win. What?
I can't write that fast.
Oh yeah, I forgot. You're right, slow. Okay, number two. I remember you sitting in the front row. Number two, God is never frustrated or thwarted in what he wants. Is that what y'all need me to repeat?
Yeah.
Okay. God is never frustrated or thwarted in what he wants. Number three, God will win. God will win, and all will work out perfectly according to his plan. God will win, and all things will work out perfectly according to his plan. The decretive will of God is the source of our courage and our faith. Thy will be done. The decretive will of God is the source of our courage. That things are not going to fall apart tomorrow and all of a sudden stop going according to the divine master plan. I don't know about you, but I've lived long enough. I'm the second oldest person in this room. Fixing to be by a lot. I am plenty old enough, and most of you guys, especially on this side of the room, are old enough to know life feels like it's falling apart sometimes. And to say that it's not is just churchy nonsense. Life does feel like it's falling apart, and it does feel like it's not going according to any plan that you can tell or discern. But the decretive will of God is our courage. The idea that God is totally in control and yet totally unkind or ungracious is more terrifying than him being out of control. I'll repeat that again. The idea that God is totally in control and yet totally unkind or ungracious is more terrifying than him being out of control. It's one thing to have a good God who's just not omnipotent, who doesn't have the gusto to make everything work according to his plan. He just doesn't have the grit and the gall and the guts. Like my alliteration. He doesn't have that. Brian's like, yeah, absolutely. He doesn't have that, but he's doing his best. I mean, that's terrible. That's terrible news. But if he's doing his best and he's a good God, then hey, at least he's trying. But if he is all powerful and can make everything come to pass exactly as he desires it to be, then here's the question. If he's ungracious or unloving or unkind, now we have the greatest tyrant ever to exist in the history of the universe. And woe is all of us. Coop. The idea that God is totally in control and yet totally unkind or ungracious is more terrifying than him being out of control. Sorry, Charlie. If God is not good, this is the worst news in the world. I'll repeat, that one's short enough that maybe you can stay with me. If God is not good, if God is not omnibenevolent, if God is not good, that's the worst news in the world. Because he's all powerful and he's wicked. But because God is good, the decretive will of God is the pillow the Christian lays their head on at night. I'll say that again, obviously. I have Tourette's. But because God is good, the decretive will of God is the pillow the Christian lays their head on. The decretive will of God is the pillow that you lay your head on. You rest on the sovereign decree of God. And it's the strength that you will need, and if you haven't been here, you will be. It's the strength that you will need in the darkest moments of your life. Is that everything, no matter how it's going to hell in a handbasket, everything is going according to plan. Just not your plans. And I don't know about you, but without this, I'm just going to be really honest. Without this, I have no idea, and I told Keaton this the other day. Without this belief, I don't know where I would be in regards to my son and all the challenges and difficulties that we've faced over the past almost 6 years now. I don't know. I don't know. I've prayed every night for years and years that the Lord would heal him. Pray with him every night. But I walk out of his room sometimes with tears in my eyes. And I walk out of his room and I close the door and I tell him that the Lord loves him and that his mom and his daddy love him more than anything in the world. I close the door, and as soon as I close the door, the feeling, the belief, the knowledge washes over me that everything is going according to a perfect plan from a perfect Father. Just not me. And with sadness, and with grief, and with tears, I smile. Because His plan is infinitely greater than my plan. Because He is infinitely greater and better and more righteous than I will ever be. He loves that little boy in that bed infinitely more than I ever could muster up. And I go to my bed and I lay my head down, and what I lay my head on, figuratively, is the decretive will of God. That the Lord will do what is good in His sight. The decretive will of God is not ultimately our business, and is what Job spent 38 chapters trying to find out and arguing about with no answer. The whole book of the Bible is trying to investigate God's decretive will, and you leave with no answers after 41 chapters, except God tells him to shut up. And by the way, there's an equivalent in the New Testament. It's called Romans 9, where we try to search out God's will, and we search out what God is going to do in regards to salvation of individual people, and why He does what He does in His mysterious decretive will. And Paul's answer is just like God gave Job. Shut up. Well, he uses it in a fancier phrase, but it's the same thing. He says, will the thing formed say to the thing that formed him, why have you made me this way? The answer is ridiculous. Does the potter have the right to question, or rather does the clay have the right to question the potter? Of course not. That's ridiculous. The answer is, it's none of your business. That's the answer. Believe me, listen to me, young people, you're going to spend a lot of time in your life asking God why. I would caution against that. He is not obligated to give you an answer. And very likely He never will give you an answer. But He has given you plenty of answers in the next type of will, which we're about to get to, that should be good enough. Your job is not to know the unknowable. I'll say that again. Your job is not to know the unknowable. Your job is to know and trust God in the knowable. Your job is not to know the unknowable. Your job is to trust God in the knowable. Which we turn to next in our discussion, the preceptive will of God. Number 2, the preceptive will of God. And for you people who are past 5th or 6th grade. Precept is the basic word here. Okay? Preceptive. Preceptive. Ivy, I know you know how to spell. These other public school people. So preceptive. Okay? Precept. Now notice I didn't say perceptive. Like when I say, oh, you're very perceptive. That's not what we're saying. It's precept, as in law, as in a guideline, as in a legal matter. A precept. Okay? The preceptive will of God. Y'all like this. I'm a little surprised that some of y'all are not bursting in flames from the decretive will of God, but we've made it. So, number 2, the preceptive will of God. This is the will of God that is just as binding, just not yet currently obeyed. The preceptive will of God is that will by which God makes moral claims on man and expects him to obey. The moral law is perfect. It's our ability and desire to keep the moral law that is the issue, and you know that. The preceptive will of God is what is revealed in the Bible. I'll say that again. The preceptive will of God is here. This is the preceptive will of God. Personally, I think He's told us plenty. But people disagree. God expects us to be fully obedient to everything that He has revealed concerning truth, morality, and Himself. Put simply, the preceptive will is what God has shown. The decretive will is what God has hidden. The preceptive will is what God has shown. The preceptive will is what God has shown. The decretive will is what God has hidden. The preceptive is what should be seen. The decretive is what is invisible. We are not responsible for the decretive and what we know about it, but we are responsible for lining up our lives and beliefs in accordance with the preceptive will of God. You are responsible for lining your life up with the preceptive will of God. When Jesus says, your will be done, He means that we should pray wanting the preceptive will of God to be done just like the decretive will is always done. Which makes more sense when we get next week or a few months to the next line when it says, Thy kingdom come, Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Why? Because the connection is everything up there is the decretive and preceptive will. They're the same thing. But down here, you're decreeing and ordaining all things, but creatures are still defying you. We're still sinning against you. We're still blaspheming against you. We're still denying your right as Lord of the universe to rule and govern everything about us. We have a problem with it. But there, everyone does exactly. You can't tell the difference between the decretive and the preceptive will. Same thing in heaven. Thy kingdom come, Thy will be done on earth. It's always done there. No questions asked. Full stop. Let's be honest. Most people in our world care not at all for the will of God. Just their own. Let me ask you a question. Real question. Live bullet. Question. Do you honestly think that God cares more about what you want than what He wants?
Well, He wants the best for you. So.
What's the best for you? Come on now, y'all spend a lot of time with me. What's the best for you? What's the best thing God could ever want for you? Not wrong, not wrong. Both of them are right. I'm glad to see you awake. So, yes, right? So, the best thing for you is Him. The best thing for you and everyone is Him. He's the best thing in the universe. It stands to reason He's the best thing that anyone could ever have. It would be unloving for God to give you something else as the highest calling and gift in your life other than himself? Question again. Do you honestly think that God cares more about what you want than what he wants? It's a real question. And you don't have to answer out loud. I hope you would join me in concluding that the answer is no. I don't honestly think that God cares more about what you want in your puny little mind, in your puny little heart, in your puny little life. That he cares more about what Alex Crittenden wants. I mean, just saying it is uncomfortable. But we act like that. Do we not? Am I the only person? I act like that all the time. That what God wants, how many times do we hear these Christian pagans in the church all the time that say things like, God just wants me to be happy. It does start with an H, but it's not happy. God wants you to be holy. He wants you to be like his son. Jesus said, my food is to do the will of him who sent me. My sustenance is to obey him. My sustenance is Taco Bell. Obviously. So, here's my point. I really want some of y'all to think about this, okay? There is an elephant in the room, and I will go this whole lesson without pointing at it. But I want you to think hard about that question. Does God honestly care more about what you think than what he thinks? Does God honestly care more about what you want than what he wants? In American evangelicalism, we have been told a resounding yes to that question. And that is false. Isn't it kind of odd that we are so convinced that Jesus wants things but gives them up because we want different things? I mean, Alex is laughing. The rest of y'all should be laughing too. This is absurd. It's preposterous. What I just said was horse crap. That Jesus wants, he's the sovereign king of the universe. He's the ruler of every atom in this cosmos. And all the bosons and quarks and all the things smaller than that too. He rules every planet, every star, every galaxy, every black hole, every cell in your body, and every atom. But God forbid, he just wants what you want more than what he wants. I've never met a king like that. You never will. They don't exist. Subjects are allowed to present ideas to kings. And if they're bad ideas, sometimes they're killed. But if the king is good, the king says, I'll consider that, but I have the final say. We have gone so terribly wrong. God is a gentleman. Jesus is a gentleman. He'll never force himself on anyone. But he's not a gentleman, he's Lord. And sometimes the best thing he could ever do is knock you off of a donkey on the way to Damascus. Sometimes the greatest thing he could ever do is tell you to throw your nets on the other side of the boat so that your boat flipping sinks out there in the middle of the Sea of Galilee, so you have to walk on shore and follow him. These are references in the New Testament, in case you're not aware. Sometimes Jesus is such a gentleman that he tells Peter that one day when you're old, people will lead you against your will and take you by the hand and make you do things you don't want to do, in reference to his crucifixion upside down. Stop saying that he's a gentleman. He doesn't need permission from anyone. your will be done. I could spend the next week talking about this. This type of thinking means that man is sovereign and that God plays second fiddle. And you know, it works perfect with us because in America we love to say things like, I'm the captain of my own soul and I chart my own course for success. And we're told that we're supposed to have, 2.5 children and a white picket fence and a nuclear family and $80,000 a year. And we're told all these things, but the truth is, your job is not to do anything He doesn't tell you to do. He is Lord. He is master and commander of every single thing you've ever laid eyes on and all the things you never will lay eyes on. There are planets that and maybe multiverses. There are planets, there are whole sections of the cosmos that light will never reach from there to here. The dark part of the universe that will never be visible to the James Webb Telescope. He's Lord of that darkness too. He's Lord of hell and all the demons that'll spend all of eternity there. He's Lord of that too. He is the God of the devil. You do understand that. If you think I'm crazy, fine, but just don't dismiss me before you hear me say this. In Revelation 20, Jesus takes a giant chain and binds the devil and throws him into the abyss for 1,000 years. This is not a war between two demigods. This is the war between the sovereign, omnipotent creator, King Jesus, who created Lucifer and all the other angels, and a nasty little sinful, rebellious angel shaking his puny little fist at the creator of the cosmos. And it's high time we stop running around afraid of the devil. Greater is He who is in you than he who is in the world. Not to mention the fact that in Christ we have authority over those things. Because all authority on heaven and earth has been given to me. That's what Jesus said in Matthew 28. All authority. The name that's above every name. All of them. Do you honestly believe that God respects our choices to sin against Him and rebel against Him? You honestly think He goes, well, I wouldn't have done it that way, but they made an adult decision. Seriously. You think He just goes, I wouldn't have advised that, Alex, but I'm here if you need me. I'm just a phone call away. Robert?
Well, if it was like that, I'd be like, why aren't you doing something? Why?
We would be, right?
Yeah.
You're right.
You would be like, why?
But that's why you'll never get the promotion.
Why?
So, do you really believe, here's another one, do you really believe that God cares more about what you want for eternity than what He wants for eternity? Do you really think that He cares more about what you want for forever and ever than what He wants forever and ever? All I'm trying to do is pull out some of our thoughts and make you at least just look at them for a second. At least just give them a once-over. It's nonsense. When I take it out of the context of all the, he would never force he's a giant. When I take it out of the context of all those things and I show it back to you, you go, well, that does sound kind of sus. That is kind of weird. It's kind of cringy. What?
You're trying to make my brain actually work, aren't you?
I've always tried to do that, Coop.
My brain only partly functions there today.
Well, that's why you come see me. So, do you really think that He feels creatures have the right? Here's the question. Do you really think that He feels creatures have the right to blaspheme His name and make a mockery of His plans?
No.
No. If so, why does hell exist if that's true? Oh yeah, you can shake your little fist and you can spend your whole life dishonoring and defaming the King, but You won't get away with it.
Well,
We are called to pray that His will be done. We're asking that God brings the world, listen to me, we're asking that God brings the world and all of the people in it to will and behave and believe like Christ and to do His will. Our understanding of preceptive will from Matthew 6 will help us not fall into a few traps. Trap number 1. Now these are long, but I'll try to shorten them for our attention spans. Number 1. Some people overemphasize the sovereignty of God so much that they refuse to pray. Period. Some people overemphasize the sovereignty of God so much that they refuse to pray. They're called hyper-Calvinists. And I don't like them. Also not a big fan of Arminians either. But, to be fair, they are both erroneous. They're both in error. And I'll explain that. I'm not trying to be unfair to either side, one side or the other. They both go too far. Okay? So, some people overemphasize the sovereignty of God that they refuse to pray, and that's wrong. And I flatly denounce that. That's wrong. Yeah, we're commanded to pray. We better be serious about praying. Jesus prayed more than anybody, and He was God in the flesh. We ought to be serious about praying. Don't ever think, and what this is called fatalism. The idea that I don't need to pray, and even if I did want to pray, what's the point? I can't change anything. God is so totally in control, and He's so utterly sovereign that what I do is just beating my head against a concrete wall. It's never going to work. There's no point. I just don't even need to waste my breath. God's going to do what God's going to do, whether I like it or not, and we just give up. And that's wrong. That's wrong to do that. It's, in my estimation, to be honest, I think it's evil. I think it's evil. And shame on hyper-Calvinists for saying that. But the second issue is some people emphasize the free will of man, whatever they mean by that, so much that they think nothing gets done without prayer. Say it again. Some people emphasize the free will of man so much that they think nothing at all gets done without prayer. And that's wrong too. Why? Because God is really in control, right? So they're both a ditch, and you've got to be careful not to fall in one ditch or the other. They're both not right. To say, well, what's the point of praying? God's in control is wrong, and it's dismissive, and it's fatalistic. But to also turn around and say, and I'm not going to even slander Arminians on this is just Pelagianism. The idea that my will is so powerful and God is so utterly not in control. By the way, a new heresy that's sprung up over the past few decades that you guys might ought to be aware of, especially you people going to college, you smart people. One of the things that you might want to be aware of is called open theism. Open theism. Okay? Now, don't have time to dismantle that tonight, but I will say this. The idea of open theism, there's many schools of it, of course, and so I don't want to misrepresent my opponent. I never want to misrepresent my opponent. But when we talk about open theism, one of the things that's very common about it is it goes along with what we call process theology. That God is in process, that He's learning, that He's adapting, that He's a super intellect just like ChatGPT. And He's in the process of adapting to the information as it unfolds, and He's making the best possible choices and creating the best possible world as He's reacting. That's not God. That's not the God of the Bible, at least. That may be Zeus, but that's not the God of the Bible. So just to be clear, I renounce that as well. But I also renounce the hyper-Calvinist, and I renounce the Pelagian or some Arminian view of the fact that nothing ever gets done without prayer. That's not true. I get all kinds of grace. It's called a heartbeat that I don't pray for. I mean, I could go on. We could all go on forever. I mean, I'm not picking on you. I'm just, you and I are making eye contact. Like, you could tell me 10 things if you really were serious and sat down. You could tell me 10 things, maybe 100 things today that you didn't ask for, you didn't deserve, you didn't pray for, that the Lord was gracious to you about, right? I mean, we all could. I hope we all could. The fact that the Lord doesn't need us to pray for Him to be good to us, man, what grace is that? The grace found in Christ alone. Amen? That's good news. It's called common grace. And it's Matthew 6 later on. So, number 3, the correct view is that we pray not to change. I hope you hear this. The correct view is that we pray not to change the decretive will of God, but to change our obedience and participation in carrying out His preceptive will. Too many words? The correct view is that we pray not to change the decretive will of God, but to change our obedience in carrying out His preceptive will. In other words, prayer is a lot more about you becoming in line with the preceptive will of God than it is changing God's mind. Now you go, that's not... Hold on. If God knows all things and He's not in process, which newsflash, He's not. If God knows all things, He ordains all things, you're not feeding Him new information, correct? Be careful how you come to Him and go, I know you're busy, but this happened earlier and I just want to make you aware. Like, seriously? Really? 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 You hear people, they do this all the time. Lord, I know you got a lot going on, but this happened and I just need you to know about it, and I give it to you, and sorry for burdening you, but like, and it's like, what? Wait, what? Who are you talking to? You talking to me? You talking to Alexa in your house? Who are you talking to? Who are you talking to, Willis? Because you're not talking to Him. You're not informing Him of anything. Do not ever think for 1 second you're informing Him of anything. Now you confide in Him. You cast all your cares on Him because He cares for you. You better do that. But you're not informing Him of anything. If you're telling Him out loud, it's just for your sake, not for His. And you should do that, though. You should pour your heart out to Him. And I know some of you do that. And good job. You should cast everything in your heart on Him. In whatever way that looks like for you. But don't inform Him. You're not informing Him of anything. And you're not changing His mind, by the way. Prayer is not changing God's mind. Now you go, that's not Abraham and the cities of the plains and and so you might go, well, that's not true, Taylor. Abraham didn't change God's mind. God wanted to see how gracious and merciful and loving Abraham was towards the cities of the plains. To think for 1 second that you change God's mind would mean that He would have to be working on insufficient information, or that He would have to be misguided in His motives. God forbid. The cold hard fact is that all over this planet, everywhere on earth and out in the universe, as well as in heaven, everything from an atom, I said this earlier, to a star, from an ant to a whale, are carrying out the decretive and preceptive will of God. But when it comes to man, we say, not happening. You may win in the end, but now I refuse to obey your preceptive will. Does this bother you? That the king is at least here and now not getting what he wants? That men and women and demons and fallen angels yawn in his face? Does that make you sick to your stomach? It ought to. What if I told you that your salvation, I told you, I still hope you got your safety heart, son. What if I told you that your salvation was not even first and foremost about you? But that it's much more about the Lord and the Father giving a people, a bride, to His Son. What if I said that every soul that ever came to Christ existed to make him look even more glorious than the moment before they came to him? What if I told you that one of the key things that makes a Christian unique is that they delight in the preceptive will of God? They love his word. Anybody else in here? I know I got some atheists in the house, some former atheists. Anybody else in here can testify that just like me, I used to hate the Bible and now I love it? That didn't come from me. That came from him.
I will tell you this, I didn't hate it, but I didn't really know about it.
And that's fair too. What if I told you that the gospel was making your will be done people every day all over this planet? I'll say that again. What if I told you the gospel is making your will be done people every day all over this planet? One heart at a time. And when the light goes on and regeneration and justification take place, you go from my will be done to thy will be done. That's what a Christian is. And that one day all of heaven will be filled with people who perfectly love the preceptive will of God. We will spend 1 billion eternities praising the preceptive will of God. We will spend forever praising him for how great everything he does is. Right now, we're just too sin-marred and sin-stained. We battle with the old man. We're constantly fighting to crucify our flesh, yes? We're constantly battling with who we used to be. We're constantly fighting with temptation in the world. Anybody had some temptation today? And I'm not talking about, you had one too many graham crackers. I'm not talking about they gave you 2 cups of applesauce right before nappy time. I'm not talking. Okay. If that's you, then hey, you're living a good one. But it has well been said that we care about what people think and what people want that don't even care about us or like us more than we care about what God wants. I know some of y'all personally. I know all of you personally to different degrees. But I know some of you personally, and I spend all day with your kind. And listen, let's be honest. Most of y'all care way too much what people think. In fact, I think it's one of the great ills in America today is that we have so many pansies running around thinking they care so much what people think. But they never even stop to consider whether the Lord approves of what they say and do and think and believe. It's cliche and we say it in church a lot, but our audience is an audience of one. I'm not up here for you primarily. I'm up here because he gave me a gift and I'm supposed to use it. And I'm not going to stand before J. Lee McClure, although I think I'd have a better chance. I'm not going to stand before J. Lee McClure one day at judgment. I'm going to stand before him. And I think about it all the time. And it's terrifying. J. Lee can be a bit of a critic. Not that I don't deserve it, but J. Lee can be a bit of a critic. But I know she would, at the end of the day, maybe throw me a bone. But the perfect judge of all the universe will never make exceptions for violating his decretive or preceptive will. Somebody has wisely pointed out that once in heaven there were 2 wills, but one was kicked out. And there has been no second will in heaven since. And for all of eternity, there will only be one will in the future. And that's God's will. And you go, no, we'll still have we have a mind and a body and we can... Yeah, you're right. But our will be in perfect harmony with his for all of eternity. I don't know about you, But as far as I can tell, every pain and twinge of sin in this sin-stained world is directly because we don't walk in accordance with the preceptive will of God. Me included, of course. But one day, I said this to the gentleman the other day, last week, but one day it says that Jesus will wipe away every tear. And the gates to the New Jerusalem will never be closed because sin will have been totally done away with. And I don't know about you, but I can't wait for that day. When there is no more wickedness, either in my heart or yours. And when everything is made right. And when the King comes back and everyone bows down and says, "Thy will be done." It says that we cast our crowns at his feet. We have a whole band called Casting Crowns. We can stop it here, but let me say this. We made it 8 pages. Let me say this. Your ability to walk in obedience is directly connected to how bad you want his will to be done in and around your life. The question is, have you gotten so sick of yourself that you've cast yourself on Christ as your only hope? It was a highlight of my life to baptize you gentlemen, to baptize Evelyn. A highlight of my life. If that's not been you, come talk to me afterwards. And if it is you, and I hope it's all of us, but if it's not, talk to me. But if it is you, that's true about you, that you've done that. And let's be serious about saying, "Thy will be done." Let's pray. Father, thank you for these students. I ask that you bless us tonight with the discussion. Lord, I ask that we would be open and that we would be beneficial to one another, and that you would give us understanding and eyes to see and ears to hear. Thank you for these students, and thank you for your word. Lord, let us have a fantastic week living out the glory that you have given us and deposited in us as jars of clay, but also that we are constantly on the lookout to be doing and walking out your preceptive will. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. All right, so